Mayor Commission work session of June 24th, and the time is 9:01 a.m. and we will get started. The first order of business is smart loading. Wynn and Kevin, you guys are going to walk us down this path?
Yes, Mayor. I'm going to share a presentation. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having us today and talk about smart loading. And before we start on smart loading, I want to talk about where we're at, and especially what are the city's collaboration. We were invited to be part of Transportation for America. This is a collaborative that talk about urban mobilities and urban mobility strategies this year. It comprised of 13 cities in the country to talk about what are the emerging technology and how do we manage our space more efficiently, dynamically, and as we're transitioning in and out of COVID. So let's talk about transportation demand management. This is a recommendation out of our 2018 downtown parking study, and to talk about what are the future demand of our curb space. And as we're transitioning from a single park vehicle, we see more demand for micromobility services or our trolley network, and especially what we think of as TNCs, which are in short for transportation network companies, such as Uber and Lyft. PUDO is also another term what we typically use, which is pick up and drop off. And then how do we manage those more efficiently? And that's what we're trying to emerge from. As you know, we are very dependent of delivery options, especially emerging from COVID. And we know that this could cause a different type of demand that we traditionally see. As parking demand decline, we see that there are more options, because the term freight delivery has really changed and evolved over this time. What we think of traditionally as a UPS or FedEx has now transitioned to Instacart, Grubhub, different catering delivery, and we have reacted and we have made some policy changes, especially during the reopening effort, by creating 3-minute passenger loading zone for pickup delivery. You probably have seen some of these signs on Clematis itself. And this is a reaction. So we want to be proactive as we manage our curbside. And more importantly, there's quite a lot of safety concern, as there is higher demand in what we see, such as double parking. How many times have we seen a double park vehicle on Clematis and another vehicle goes in the opposite direction trying to bypass that? And then, of course, there are a lot of pedestrian safety concern, as they're not identified. Where is the safe place to cross, because their sight distance is being blocked. So these are some items that we think that is a concern, and how do we address these? So let's talk about traditional parking, that what we see traditionally we see in our downtown area. We see meter parking and we see commercial loading zone. And they, traditionally meter parking, even though it's the same amount of space, those are the only areas that we are collecting fees to manage all the commercial loading. And then there's other demands on top of that. Right now, we see that some of our parking spaces are turning into parklets or outdoor dining areas. So there's a lot of dynamic use that's shifting. And so this is the smart loading itself will help us transition. So I have Dawn on. I see Dawn is on. Dawn is with Cord. And I'd like to introduce to everybody to the team in a little bit. But Dawn is part of Cord, and they are a New York-based mobility company. They offer a comprehensive curb management platform with providing tools to digitally inventory, price, allocate, and manage the curb. And we enter into this conversation with Cord through what we saw as, it's called a digital curb challenge. Cities all over the countries could connect with CORD and really talk about what are our challenges and what do we see as an emerging trend. We went through I wouldn't say an interview process, but there was conversations to talk about what does the city see our future transportation network and how do we help each other. And that's where we're at today to talk more about the smart loading. I'm going to leave it up to Don to do a quick introduction of what CORD and what CORD can provide, and before I continue.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us here today. I'm also joined by our CEO and co-founder, Stephen Smith. And yeah, CORD has been around since 2016. We're, as Wynn said, a comprehensive curb space management platform. And we're all about helping cities manage their streets better. I think curbs are increasingly recognized as actually a real tool that cities have at their disposal to help them meet all manner of mobility goals, whether that's their Vision Zero street safety goals or reducing congestion, providing access for different types of users. And so what Wynn is going to talk about today is one of our programs, which is a Smart Zone program to really focus on managing delivery and service vehicles, their use of the curb, which we think will address some of those issues Wynn has raised, but also provide them with a better service really at the curb. So we see this as something that is sort of a win-win for the different stakeholders looking at this, including the brick and mortar retailers who those commercial users are serving. And that's the focus of the pilot. But I just want to also mention we have part of our package, because we've been doing different things in curb management for years, is really this platform that gives the city a lot of data access to know what's going on in its curbs, analyze the impact of different scenarios, communicate that information out to the public. So I think it's one thing that makes us unique is that we do smart zones, but we do a lot more, and it's something that a city can really build on as it builds out its curb management practice.
Okay, thank you so much. In what Don, to speak a little more of what Don said, is really modernize our communication strategies. And as you can see, there are when we set policies for parking signs, it might be confusing. So this comprehensive strategy is to turn it into a mobile app so that users can check in and check out. The other thing that Don spoke about is the technology to be able to manage it from a dashboard. So the city would have access to a dynamic dashboard that sees how the curb is being utilized at any time of the day. And inclusive with that is a mobile app that is available for users. So we know that now everybody has cell phones. Some of us has two. And the ability to use technology to find space in our city can create efficiency and with our demand. So why do we want to transition to smart curbs, and why do we want to use technology? And really to serve more people. And I think that's our goal as far as a transportation demand management strategy, is that now, as I said earlier, that our curb is being used for bike share, parklets, and loading zones, and even pickup and delivery for food options. So shifting away from a traditional parked vehicles and still be able to serve more people, and at the same time, price it in a way that it could be efficient for everybody. So our study limits, we carefully chose Rosemary Square. If you remember, about a year and a half ago, we started working on this project to eliminate 100% of on-street parking on Rosemary Avenue. Every parking spaces, metered parking spaces along this stretch from Okeechobee to Hibiscus was eliminated and turned into a flex zone. At the time, we knew that we want to flex these parking spaces because we want other usage. Maybe there's unloading, unloading in the morning, trolley access in the afternoon, and how do Uber and Lyft during midday. So for us to carefully choose the space, we believe that this smart loading pilot program will help us determine what are the policies of these type of flex spaces. So here are some program objectives, and I'll quickly go over them. Ultimately, our number one objective is safety and compliance. We know that there's a lot of double parking, and of course, traffic congestion that may cause with delays on the road network. In addition to that, we want to enhance the loading experience, as Don said earlier, with both delivery companies and then brick and mortar type of businesses. The online mobile app is the most exciting part for me because there's going to be an opportunity for people to see in real time on where our inventory. And then for the city is to help us look at fees and a management policy. What is our policy moving forward, and especially moving out of transitioning out of COVID? For CORD is to provide them feedback so that they can optimally and continue to enhance the program. So these are some program objectives. And then you're probably thinking, well, what are the benefits? What are the benefits to the city? I've listed some information here, such as digital inventory and a management platform. I know we want to be more efficient on the way that we enforce, and having a digital capability would help us target our enforcement in a zone that is highly utilized at certain hours of the day. Of course, direct communications with the vendor is very important because we've always had so much challenge reaching out to freight delivery companies. They do not talk to us, and having this pilot program will help us making that connection. Testing technology and sensors are also very exciting because we know that, for example, on Clematis, we have some sensors already with the iSense project. Can we utilize some of that sensor technology to predict when vehicles in real time when they're available? Of course, post-COVID is our primary concern because we know transportation demand itself has already shifted coming into COVID, but moving out of COVID, some of these trends are going to continue. And we want to streamline and be dynamically adaptable with those trends. Of course, program evaluation and implementation and so much more that could be an outcome of this project. The project team itself is it's a joint effort between West Palm Beach, different departments within the city, related companies, and CORD itself. There are some obligations that we commit to providing, such as signage, if there are street painting, that we need to paint the curb, of course, data collection and some enforcement. And what CORD is providing as part of this collaborative is software and really giving us access to the digital platform as we learn how to use different tools to help us. Outreach and marketing support is always important because we understand how important communication is whenever we implement a new program. And lastly, evaluation. There are projected fees to this pilot program. I believe that the number that we were discussing was approximately $10,000 because we are talking about the program does not cost the city any money, but we need to price it in a way for user to use it. So as we discuss with this pilot program, we want to reinvest all the funding back into the program by providing additional sensors or marketing. So it's a 70-30 split. The last 30% is for CORD's effort, travel time, whatever that is at their discretion. Obviously, this is only preliminary. We will not be coming back with a fee schedule until much later, and then it's subject to City Commission approval prior to any execution. So tentatively, what we're thinking of as schedule is, even though the pilot program right now is set for only 3 months, but we're thinking of the beginning of 2021. We want to make sure that is within season, and 2, that we are fully open as our reopening efforts are happening throughout statewide and the country. But there are quite a bit of pre-work that we have to do and pre-planning, such as taking the fee schedule to the City Commission for approval. And then really, this concludes my presentation. The next step is to seek approval from the City Commission itself and then execute the agreement. And at this time, I'm going to end my presentation and open up for questions.
Wynn, thank you very much. That was a very fine presentation, and thank you also to Dawn. One of the things I think we have to look at, because I'm sure it is inevitable, is where we would have loading and unloading zones for automated vehicles. That is going to happen. And so can you make that part of this pilot program? As we get AVs, where would they drop people off? How would they be picked up? And let's factor that into our analysis.
Absolutely. I think that's part of us turning into a digital platform is to be ready for new technologies as we're talking about autonomous vehicles are traversing our cities in the future. So I do think maybe Don can speak a little more, but I do think that would be one of our program objectives.
Yeah, I agree. And really, I see this as a building block towards being able to manage autonomous vehicles because it's basically creating that connection between, in this case, it's between the city and what it allows a vehicle to do. And under this program, it will be communicating that to the human driver in the vehicle who has a mobile app. But in the future with autonomous vehicles, it's going to be communicating directly to the vehicle itself. Where is the vehicle allowed to go, basically? So I see this as kind of building those muscles, both in the city and in our platform for that future where it really becomes essential for the city to have ways to direct autonomous vehicles where they're going. So they're meeting the city's needs and they're not kind of leading down that kind of nightmare path of vehicles circling around and things like that.
This is all right. So you'll include that in your analysis with the pilot program.
Yes, sir. I believe Stephen would like to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that our platform has what's called an API, Application Programming Interface, which is used by other computers basically to integrate for those that may not know. And we've actually already supported autonomous vehicle use. So that's fundamental to our vision.
Okay.
Is the ability to essentially do computer-to-computer communication so that as we have that digital curb, we can communicate out all the rules, the prices, the availability to a automated or an autonomous vehicle that can then obviously make decisions. And so our API our platform has already been used to help autonomous vehicles to do routing, staging. Where can they sit along the curb to wait for the next pickup and things like that in the Bay Area. And I know there are a number of projects afoot in the Florida area. So we're very eager to support those as we can.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple of questions. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm not sure that you briefly touched on it just a second ago. I was just going to ask, this is a pilot program, obviously, for us, but I was going to ask whether it's been successfully implemented in other jurisdictions and how it worked out.
Yes, this is a pilot program for us, and within 1 year, we have an ordinance that restricts us to a 1-year pilot program. With any pilot program, I think one thing we have to be aware of is that we need to be prepared for success and failure, and how do we emerge from it. I believe Stephen has touched on it. They do a lot of work in the Bay Area. There's 3 other cities that has not been disclosed yet, has been selected with this program also. And of course, ultimately, part of the program objective is to evaluate and report back to the City Commission on how, what's our strategy and how do we emerge from it. So I do think that San Francisco is part of the one of the program that has been initiated much longer than we have. There's been a lot of good data that came out of it also, but this is very dynamic. As the mayor mentioned, like autonomous vehicles, all this information is very dynamic, but what we want to do is we want to future-proof and set our policies to be able to accept these type of changes.
Another question from Madam President, Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. And I'm certainly supportive of making sure that West Palm Beach is on the cutting edge of technology. Being this is a pilot program, I was wondering if there were a couple of ways to address populations that I think may be highly affected, yet not familiar with technology. Generally, our driving population is older. And so those will be the parking spaces that are displaced with this new curb management model. So I don't know if it's signage, et cetera, that helps with that. And then secondly, we do still have a significant population that does not have access to that type of technology. They don't have smartphones, they maybe have a basic phone, And so how do we balance still having an availability for those who cannot afford, choose not to engage in that technology, while still allowing those who choose to participate in something, you know, new and groundbreaking?
Absolutely, Commissioner. I think it's very important. As you can see, we've made a conscious decision to not swap out our parking meters because we know that there are a certain population that you still use cash and coins. Very similar to how we pick and choose, and I think that's part of the program objective. Is not every single parking spaces is going to be eliminated for this moving forward in the future, but I think that there should be a number of parking spaces, whether if it's one side of the street or a certain parking spaces that will enhance the mobility of our network. So even though we are intended, for example, Rosemary, 100% because that was part of the design that we had it as, but moving into other areas into the city, I think we need to take into consideration that we need to preserve on-street parking for single occupancy use also. And I think that, as you said earlier, part of the program is to sign it properly and is to use part of the potential fees for us to communicate effectively with different mediums. And I do think that you know, even though the cell phone is our initial starting point, but I do think that with the newer vehicles now, and as technology improve into our vehicles itself, that there are whether it's GPS or dynamically be able to push notification into someone's while they're driving, it's also a capability of this program in the future.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lynn, for the presentation. It's exciting to see the city using technology to advance our goals here in the city. I had two questions. I think you may have answered one of them. I just wasn't clear on the user fees. You've mentioned them a couple times, and maybe now I'm having a better understanding. Are the user fees for the delivery businesses? Is that who will be paying the fees and are they paying the fees during the pilot or only after the pilot? Is that?
Yes, with the fees. During the pilot, absolutely. The user fees are targeted because this is very targeted for freight delivery, as we see that this is the only small piece of the entire transportation system. With the fee that is being developed, it needs to be calculated with market research. Obviously, I'm relying on Stephen and his team for their experience in other cities and how to calculate that fee. Those fees will be taken to City Commission for approval prior to implementation and implementing the pilot program itself. And then ultimately, during the pilot, we might want to adjust and the fees itself if we see that utilization is high or low based on how it's being used in general. And then ultimately, the key goal for me is to bring back a recommendation of the fee that will be implemented in the future if we decide to move forward.
And my second question is related to that is, so will these delivery vehicles be alerted? Is it, I don't know if it's geofence, that then when they get into that area, they're alerted, oh, I have to pay a fee for this area. And just my concern is, are we encouraging or how do we mitigate the use of cell phones on the roads that might be causing more issues if they're trying to look, oh, is this an area where I have to pay a fee? How does that work?
So I don't have a very thorough knowledge on how the app works, and maybe Stephen or Don can speak on that.
Yeah, this is an issue we thought about a great deal. I worked for the City of New York before joining Court, and Vision Zero was part of my portfolio. And my agency regulated taxis and ride hailing. And so we had to give a lot of thought to how to manage distracted driving in a world in which drivers had to use apps to do their jobs. So it was really a difficult balance to strike, and where we landed as an agency, and I think it was right, was allowing basically single touch interaction with the driver and an app. So where the app does not allow a driver to type in an address or anything like that while the vehicle is in motion. If the driver wants to do that, that can only happen when the driver is stopped. And then when the driver is in his or her last mile, they see the basically kind of like if you've seen a bike share map where you see the available stations, you do a single click on it and it navigates you there, but you don't interact with the app again until your vehicle is stopped at that location. So it's not zero interaction, but we've really designed to minimize it because we don't want drivers sitting there typing and fiddling around with an app while they're driving anywhere, but especially in an area that WIN has identified has a lot of pedestrians and just traffic in general.
Right, great, thank you so much.
Commissioner Fox?
Thank you, Wen, for this presentation. You might have mentioned this, but I know you said it's a pilot program, so does that mean that we're just starting in a small area? And I'm assuming because Related is a partner, we're talking about maybe Rosemary Square and Clematis Street. And once we're out of that pilot phase, would this work in other areas of the city? Is this something that is, are we just mostly focusing on the downtown, or could we be implementing this in other areas?
Yes, right now, because of Related to being a partner, it's really targeting the small geographic area. Ultimately, I do think that there are other target areas within the city that could be more efficient, especially South Dixie itself, as we have issues with parking and parking demand in that part of the city. But as an outcome of this project, and there's no obligation that we will continue with CORD moving forward. As an outcome, ultimately, if we see that this is a program that we want to continue, we would be advertising it and opening it up for competitively. And that is part of the pilot program itself. Clematis, we are not working as, because there's a lot of construction in the area and we don't know how it's going to function just yet. But because Rosemary Square is a little more stable for us, and we feel that because of the support that Related is also giving us, and they're very open to changes and they are managing the curb in that area, that we found that it would be a better collaborative effort if we keep the team as a small team on that end.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Wen, for this presentation. You mentioned that the pilot will begin, I guess, when we're fully open for business, tentatively at the beginning of next year.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On item 2, and Wen, you're up again with a discussion on traffic calming.
Yes, so I'm going to share a different presentation, and please let me know if everybody can see this. Okay, so thank you so much for having me again to talk about traffic calming. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about, especially that's something that we're being very proactive with our data and our research. As we're transitioning, let's talk about why do we need traffic calming itself. We design our streets so that we could serve everybody, but yet what happened is sometimes when drivers go through an area, we tend to, it's not our neighborhood, so we tend to speed up. And that's not necessarily the right community that we want to, the right streets that we want to design for our communities. So research has found, and all this data has been, is found on FHWA, that we can reduce crashes from 50 to 90% by installing the appropriate traffic calming and traffic calming devices in our community. And there's been study that conducted even in the early 2000s that shows that traffic calming is very efficient and it's actually very effective. So I'm going to go through what is the history of West Palm Beach and where we're at today. From our knowledge, we started traffic calming projects in the early 90s. And with that, we created an ordinance to retroactively talk about what is traffic calming and what are the strategy where residents can advocate for traffic calming within their street. Of course, we start working on the downtown mobility study, and then Vision Zero is like the focal point of this project. And as we know that speed kills, so that the way we design our streets is the way that we target how fast vehicles are going for. So for example, you only have study shows that you only have 20% chance of actually surviving a collision if you're in a collided with a person in a vehicle at 40 miles per hour or above. So we want to take our neighborhood streets down, and that's our strategy, is to arbitrarily lower the speed limit without changing a sign, but these strategies can help us create a more efficient and safe environment. And what is traffic calming in the city of West Palm Beach? We have many. I believe that we have almost everything in the manual that's out there, from curb extensions, chicane, traffic circle, to our traditional speed humps. And as you traverse through our cities, you'll see a little bit of everything. And that's, to me, that's very excited to see that we've been testing and piloting. So what the effectiveness of traffic calming can be really quantified in two ways, like quantitative data, which we as engineers, that's what we look for. What's the reduction of 85th percentile speed? And that's typically what we look for whenever we look at how effective something is. And then the other aspect of it is, the qualitative data, like perceptual data. People feel safer? Are the requests or the complaints reduced in our streets? How do we actively be proactive in responding to our residents? And so with these type of data, it helps shape and determine what our traffic calming standards are. So I want to share with you some research data from the ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, on speed, and I'm primarily focused on circles, which are roundabouts, and speed humps. And the reason why is because it is very effective. As you can see, the speed hump itself has an average change of 20 to 23% in reduction of speed, in mean speed itself. And so the other data is actually traffic volume, right? So sometimes I get comments and questions saying that, hey, if you install this traffic circle here, more people are going to go down my street. That's not necessarily true. If you look at the data, it says that the average percentage of change in volume, which means diversion, right? If you looked at installing a traffic circle, you have the least amount of diversion when you look at this type of strategy. Of course, speed humps itself is our preferred method to look at cut-through neighborhoods. Sometimes when for example, you're in Flamingo Park and you cross the railroad, that's typically where we like to see speed humps, because we get a lot, our network is very gridded, and that's where the cut-throughs are happening. And then lastly, safety. Collision is very, very important. I think the percentage of change is you're probably thinking, like, sometimes I get questions, why can't you just put a stop sign right there? But that's not really an appropriate use of traffic calming device. That's a traffic control device. So what we want to ensure is that sometimes when you put in so many stop signs, you see people trying to gain their speed by speeding up between stop signs. And that's not necessarily the right application also. And so from a collision standpoint, the speed humps itself it's very effective. And with that, we took all this research data, we consulted with a consultant that did even more extensive research and look at technical references and effectiveness. And then we went through a very thorough review process between engineering, public works, public utilities, and our construction office. And one of the things that we looked at as we're developing our standards and as we're updating our standards is to look at maintenance responsibilities. And I think this is really important because I have been in some really difficult situation where signs are not properly placed, or these things are not being maintained. So we want to ensure that whatever we choose, it will help our public works department with their budget and with the reduction of staff that they have. So we carefully take that into consideration as we're making our recommendations. And then, of course, anytime you add in something new, add in a new sidewalk, add in a new speed hump, there are additional maintenance responsibility that goes above and beyond. So here is an image of our traffic circle that is a standard. This was already implemented in the Northwood Northwood Historic Neighborhood up there. And one of the things that we saw is that these mini circles, the crossing shouldn't be at the intersection. It should be pulled back away from the intersection, because when you're entering in this circle, you're not necessarily looking for pedestrian, because you're always looking for vehicles. So the appropriately used crosswalk at a circle is approximately 20 feet away from the intersection. And so some of those things is what our finding as we go through this process. The other thing that I want to focus on is the speed hump. And we have, as you can see from the image earlier, and as you can see in our city, we have a lot of speed humps, a different type of speed humps, very beautifully done speed humps. But this is the standard speed hump that is recommended by the ITE. And, you know, they're, for optimal spacing. I do want to touch a point on signage within the speed hump, though. Anytime you have a vertical deflection, you have to have a sign next to it, just like stop bars goes with stop signs. So it's very important that we have to have signage next to the speed hump. And I know I've received some concern from residents saying that this is a historic neighborhood. Historically, we don't have signs on our speed hump, but speed humps are not historic use anyway, because when we built the historic neighborhood, there were no speed humps to be there to begin with. But the importance of the signs is actually very important, because it's recommended out of the MUTCD, which is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. This manual helped us shape uniformity, right? If you travel to another state, you know what a stop sign looks like, you know what street signs looks like. And so this is what guide all engineers in the country. And this is, and so I just want to emphasize on the importance of having signage. The other emphasis I want to make is the importance of having signage is actually the effectiveness of the retroreflectivity of a traffic sign. So as you can see, these are two different speed humps that I've taken, one during the day and one at night. And as you can see, we don't naturally have lights everywhere. And so the effectiveness of having a change in the roadway is actually adds to the concerned safety that we have. So signage is very, very important. And of course, with the city, we talked about like where are, from a maintenance standpoint, we focus on red and white, which is regulatory, and then yellow, which are warning. So those are our tier focus at this time. And so you've seen this already, the effectiveness of traffic calming, especially in providing a traffic circle, a roundabout. We see that there is quite a bit of reduction in 85th percentile speed. The other thing that I was concerned about when I was going through this project and just doing a lot of research is that there has been a perception that like traffic calming reduces response time, and really it can evolve from this article right here from the New York Fire Department, and to talk about how Vision Zero in general has affected them. But really, when you look into the data and you look into the article, that there's been a lot of private construction and rideshare services. So remember what we talked about smart loading and some of that safety concern? So that's the biggest culprit. So we spent a day with the fire department, our team, our transportation team spent a day with the and we visit 5 different locations. They're approximately 1,000 foot in segments, and we carefully pick them because they have different type of traffic calming devices. So we watch, we time, we experience what it's like to be in a fire truck, and we looked at what is the average speed that our fire trucks are traversing through our right of way, and what is how much time does it take. The other thing that we've done is we had one-on-one interviews with the assistant chief and the firefighters that helped us that day, and what are their challenges when they're driving through their city? Is it speed bumps? Is it stop signs? Is it traffic circle? What are the issues? So to our surprise, and it was the biggest surprise for me, is the tree branches actually affects the way the tree canopy affects the way that the turning vehicle. Sign placement, whenever our signs are too close to the intersection, so that's something that we have to look at. And then lastly, our potholes. So I guess that is traffic calming in a sense, in a not very funny way. I apologize for that. But Crowded streets due to high parking utilization is the biggest challenge. And that's one of the things that we need to work on. And we do these tests, right? We target different communities. And that's what we want to continue to work with the fire department to see how we can change parking policies and to help with response time, and especially with rescue as public safety as a concern. The other thing that was a real surprise for me is that the fire department preferred bike lanes with no on-street parking because there's no on-street parking. It's easier for them to get to their destination. And then lastly, it further validates the need for signage with speed humps, because some of these areas, the signs are, maybe they're a little old or they're non-existent. So if you look at the data on responses, the majority of the responses is actually in the afternoon, and they respond all the way into the evening. So that without signage, it actually becomes a hazard issues for our public safety. So we're very thankful for and grateful for the experience and really connect with the fire department. And that helps shape us within our recommendation, and it helps shape our policy on how we design our streets in the future as well. So we have an ordinance, and what is the traffic calming process itself, right? How can someone receive traffic calming? There's two ways. There's a city initiated, and typically we see that an area might be a safety concern. We looked at crash data, and then we get a lot of maintenance of requests from public works, and that's where the area that we tried to focus on as the other way that someone could lobby and essentially obtain traffic calming is through a resident initiated. There is a very thorough process that they have to go through, which is ensuring that they apply and making sure that they have meet the minimum criteria and obtain 50 to 75% of signatures within the block. Everybody has to be on board. From there, we as engineers will conduct a safety study, and then we make a recommendation to the traffic calming advisory committee. And the advisory committee is comprised by our fire, police, our different departments, and then of course a member of the public to tell us that they concur or disagree, and maybe there's some recommendations that it could be tweaked moving forward. From there, we will enhance our design and get feedback from our public works department, and then we make a presentation to the city commission. Ultimately, if and when it passes, we create a budget request, and then we move into construction activities. So that is the process that we have mapped out for anybody who's interested in obtaining traffic calming on their street. So this is the code, section 86-350. It talks about what are the minimum requirements, right? When you apply for traffic calming, you have to meet these minimum requirements, such as the streets that's not an alley or a dead end. Nobody's really driving fast on those streets except for the residents that's living there to begin with. So we try to discourage that type of installation. But I think what's really important is that the signatures, making sure that because this is a grassroots effort, making sure that residents along the streets concur with you. And that's very, very important for us. And so I'm going to show you guys a project that is city initiated that's been on hold. It's Olive Avenue. It is a maintenance project. It's identified from Southern Boulevard all the way to Okeechobee. It's approximately 2 miles long. There's existing bike facilities on there already. But what we found is that the 85th percentile along there is 37 miles per hour. It's very, very high. If anything, we had a collision on earlier in the previous 2 months, I believe, where it ended up being a fatality. So we enhance the design to look at how can we simply mark it to be more visible for users, and then adding in additional speed humps in between. And of course, our spacing that we're trying to target is about, it's approximately 500 feet, right? It should be between 350 to 500 feet, so that vehicles could be slowing down before they can pick up speed and they'll hit another speed bump. So right now, this is the data that we pull of the crash history and what type of crashes that we get along that area. There are existing one traffic circle, which is the Big Norton Circle that we worked on about 5.5 years ago, and then 3 speed bumps along the corridor. So what we want to do is take this opportunity to really enhance what we have and by adding in additional speed humps and adding in additional signage to properly warn. So why I'm showing this is because we didn't have a chance to do community outreach. We did reach out to residents. There's different neighborhood association along with PBAU along the corridor that in one particular instance that I believe it was completely miscommunicated back to other residents. This is not a brand new project. This is a maintenance project. What we're trying to do is enhance what is already out there, because it's very important for us to connect Olive all the way from the end of the city, from Gregory Road into our downtown. So this is our primary route, and it's an alternative route also that connects our neighborhoods. And so I just want to show you, there are going to be 87 additional speed humps along here and a total of 125 signs. I also had a comment saying that this is way too many signs. So I just want to compare with this particular project, 2 miles, and compare it to another project that we recently did in Commissioner Schoaf's district, which is Spruce. It's about 0.6, 0.7 miles. And within that section, we had approximately 200 signs and that's very appropriate, the amount of signage that we have for a traffic calm street. So for us to compare what in that street and what we are proposing here, it's actually very reasonable for us to apply this application. So with that, what are our moving forward? What are our strategy moving forward? So we are very focused on being proactive, because when you're proactive, you address the equity issue as we talk about connecting neighborhoods. Really collector roads, and those are streets such as like the north-south route, right? We're talking about Spruce is one of them. We talked about Olive, Lake Avenue, we're actively working on already. Parker is the other one. So those are our primary north-south connector that we're looking at. So we want to be proactive and to be supportive of the Vision Zero initiatives. And more importantly, we are working hand in hand with the Department of Public Works to talk about where are our challenges and where do we want to talk about our maintenance. So how can we help as engineers to, one, identify where our, what is missing, to do inventory and to help us get to that point. Ultimately, you know, our traffic calming advisory committee was a little stagnant, and so we want to reinitiate that effort and creating it, taking some of these case study and presenting it to the committee for upcoming projects, as well as just not being reactive on the cases that was submitted by residents. So historically, we bring cases from residents to the committee, but we also want to now being proactive and bring street projects and projects initiated from the engineering department or public utilities department and bring it to the committee for recommendation on what else we can do. And then lastly, it's, you know, this is something that I'm actively trying to work on, is to incorporate public safety recommendations in every project that we do. So we have one-on-one Zoom calls with our fire department yesterday on a different project. And, you know, a lot of things that we don't think about as engineers and as designers is, it's really interesting, is the placement of a tree can actually affect the way that they respond. So we always have to take balance all that and take into consideration their comments. And at this time, it concludes my presentation, and we're here for questions.
Mayor, you're muted.
Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very fine. How is the Traffic Advisory Committee selected?
The
Advisory Committee.
Yes, sir. The member of the public is a nomination from the mayor's office. The committee itself identify a within the department. For example, it's no longer say a member. It used to say the director of public utilities. Now it's a representative of the utilities department. So that each individual department nominates an employee to sit on our committee. For example, in the fire department, Assistant Chief Leduc is part of the committee, and he is very well attended.
Okay, thank you. We have a few questions. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate this presentation. I found it really compelling, the correlation between the speed on a road and the significance of injury and fatalities. So I think that traffic calming is a very important thing that we should be doing in our city. You know, as far as, and I also appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to ride with our fire department to see what their concerns are when it comes to traffic calming, because traditionally it's been a concern to apparatus operators. The traditional speed bumps are a problem when you're transporting a patient. They're a significant problem because there's no way to get over them without creating problems for the patient in the back, especially with IVs in and doing CPR and things like that. Could you just talk a little bit about how these speed humps are not speed bumps, and that they are capable of being able to, you know, to go over, as I understand it, without jostling everyone, you know, in the apparatus?
Right. So there's earlier in the presentation, I focused on two types of speed bumps, and I'm going to name them based on their official name. One is an ITE, which is a little shorter and a little taller, and a Seminole, which is a little more plateau and flat. So we talked to the fire department. We looked at their routes, and we looked at if there are speed humps, like for example, Olive, which is a primary north-south route. The preferred application method is the plateau, the Seminole speed humps. And those are the applications that we looked at our collector roads, right? For example, if it's a cut-through road, east-west routes, that is a traditional neighborhood, we tend to look at a higher ITE speed humps. So we use them interchangeably based on how we think that the routes of the public safety access is going to affect their. But I do agree with you. One of the things that I've learned really clearly is that it is very bumpy, but it also affects a patient if their back is hurt or like you said, if they're injured.
Okay, Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. Thanks, Gwen, so much for all you're doing to keep our roads safe. I just had a question about when you were talking about sort of identifying the areas that maybe need traffic calming and then working closely with the residents. I thank you for that. I really appreciate all the communication you do with them. But I guess my question is, if you have identified an area, and is there ever a time that the residents disagree and don't want it? And then what happens in that case? If we're suggesting that it needs traffic calming, but they don't want it, but we have the responsibility to also be keeping, drivers safe. And so, I mean, I just wonder what happens in that situation. And is it because of the specific kind of traffic calming? Like, is it sometimes that they would prefer something else? Or do we overrule them? I'm just curious what would happen if that has come up.
Yes, it actually has come up very frequently. So there's two scenario. That's why the application process is very important for us. And I know that I've also received some comments where people don't want to get the application process. They want us to initiate. That's not necessarily appropriate, because we want to make sure that every neighbor, and especially this is a majority rule type of ordinance that we set in place, that 75% of residents on the block agrees to it. And of course, we also have one or two of those who is very against it, but we also defer and refer back to, this is the community joint effort, and this is something that is it should be respected with everybody that's living on the block and not just an individual. The other thing that we found is when we look at city initiated project, that it's we don't get a chance to communicate with everybody on individually because this is a safety concern that we have for the corridor. So we try to connect with them even though one-on-one or through group meetings, but it's also part of our job is to get them to understand that this is for the safety and security of everybody that's using the corridor. I know that it affects those who are individual, who's living there on the corridor. But for example, like the Olive project, right? You already have traffic calming. It's just not placed properly. So if people understand that they want a reduction of speed, they don't understand necessarily how do you get there as far as the goals and the strategy. So and so we try to connect with them. And obviously, you know, Commissioner, it's always very difficult that we know we can't please everybody, but we know that this is a recommendation that is for the better good, and it takes a team of effort. So, and sometimes when we connect with them, it might not be a signage, and it might not be something. They're just really angry that people are driving really fast on the street. So.
Okay, very good. Madam President, you had a question?
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, Wen, for your presentation. I know you mentioned a number of times the Spruce project up here, and I know there's been a number of learnings from that project. So I had two questions, actually. One, you know, looking at things like the roundabouts that are here on Spruce, what we have found is we understand it's a larger line of sight to get to the crosswalk, but it's increasingly more difficult to influence people's behaviors. So those who are needing to use a crosswalk, be it in a wheelchair, et cetera, may go to where there's a ramp, but those who are walking a lot of times don't follow that crosswalk anyway and cross in the line of sight. And understanding you can't, you know, stand out there all day, every day and police people going across the street. Is there a better way to try to make an adjustment? Are we looking at kind of right tool, right job? Because I know we've had a number of, you know, comments back and forth on speed bumps, as well as what kind of speed bump is appropriate to use in what kind of neighborhood. So how do we make those adjustments and determine kind of right tool, right job for traffic calming?
Sure. So to speak on the crosswalk itself, you know, we have to follow strict ADA guidelines. And we have to design for the lowest common denominator, and those are people with who aren't able. And so with these type of proposed design, it comes into a lot of consideration for ADA access, and that is who we're designing for. People in wheelchairs or strollers, and might need to cross at those locations. The other thing is that there's significant like crash data that suggests that these, especially mini circles, should be designed a certain way. And that is like to pull back 20 feet from the intersection for a crosswalk, because that is a length of a single occupancy vehicle. I know we cannot change behavior. I hope that we could educate, and this is part of one of the E's in the Vision Zero, is that we know that engineering can reduce the speed, but part of it is educating the general public on where to cross. And to speak on the other part that you asked about, what type of speed hump is appropriate, you know, and I know some, whenever we make this installation, it's very important that we be consistent in what type of installation we make in what type of neighborhood. And so I have received comments from different neighborhoods that says, we want the pretty ones, we want the nicer pavered one, but that's not necessarily the ones that we're installing in low income neighborhoods. So I want to be very consistent on how we've done that, but we also have given, communities a different option at that point. One offered to pay for the upgrades. There's one particular neighborhood, I believe it was Edgewood in Commissioner Lambert's district, that they wanted grass. So no problem. We install the application, and at the end of the day, they've actually taken over maintenance responsibility of the traffic calming devices by signing an agreement with the city. So we're very open to different type of strategy to make it more equitable for all communities.
Sure. And just one follow-up, if I may, Mayor.
Yes.
One of those other conditions, when that you described, was going from stop sign to stop sign, and you have those that choose to try to speed up to beat the stop sign almost. That's a condition that we have a lot in the North End, specifically along Poinsettia, along Tamron Avenue. So when you have large spans of road like that, to do a citizen-initiated process, what's a 75% of the block look like when we're looking at kind of a semi-major roadway going through a community?
Right. And a lot of time we rely on the neighborhood association as a, you know, because they're, especially in Poinsettia, I can tell you that for us to establish a stop sign, there's very strict guidance on how we can put a stop sign at the intersection, an all-way face stop sign. And that's with vehicles, you know, how many cars is going in each direction. And that's what we looked at. I think that for that particular instance, please have the community connect with me. We might want to do a resolution from the association itself if they have a support letter, and that's something that we can initiate on our end, and it'd be because that is a primary north-south route. Also, that could be a city-initiated project.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Wynn, and I appreciate both you and Commissioner Schoaf mentioning the community education piece and how important that is, and I see this as a part of that. Also wanted to say thank you for working directly with our fire department. I'm sure it's not the first time that you all have done that, but it's really great to hear about this kind of collaboration and to see how we adjust things based on what you learned in a hands-on situation. I have a couple of questions, and first I want to ask, is this the same project that, and you referenced it in your presentation, I think it was about 6 months ago, that was presented, that had a lot of folks in these communities on Olive coming out and speaking out against it? And if it is there anything that's changed, whether it be logistically or via community outreach?
Yes, to answer your question, yes, it is the same project. We did not have a chance to connect with the community and have a formal communication presentation prior to going to construction. We are planning on outreaching to the residents after this presentation to the Mayor and Commission. I do think that the concern that in one particular neighborhood, because we have different neighborhoods, we have Mango Promenade, we had the FAU's itself, which is supportive of this project, or I'm sorry, PBAU. But I think what we need to better to outreach again, and really to give the residents the reason why we're doing this. And you have the crash data, you have the speed data along the corridor. But what more importantly, because I think it's the emails that has been going around, and I believe everybody almost have seen one version of it, is wildly miscommunicated of what is the design, and it's being interpreted in a false way, because we are presenting an additional of 80 something speed humps, and with each speed humps it comes with 2 signs. We're doing the bare minimum as far as like appropriate signage, and I think with some of the outcry and the outreach is very one-sided, and I believe that the city didn't have an opportunity to really state the fact. Here's the data, this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going to help. And we measure also the other section of Olive that we completed. We found that there's a reduction of 8% in 85th percentile speed immediately after this installation. So part of our project and process is to propose a design, communicate, and then ultimately to report back. Here's what's happening. Here are the reduction of speed along the corridor.
Thank you. And Mayor, just a suggestion, whether it's this project or other projects, I think that it's really important that we communicate what the project is and the design. But when I like what you're saying about the why, and I just think that whether it's 6 months prior to, or a year, or just ongoing, that maybe that's something the city could look at as far as our communications is, and I know we've been doing this with Vision Zero, but just continuing to keep those conversations top of mind all the time, so that when these issues come up, it's not having to restart the wheel of talking about how important safety is for these types of projects.
A very good point. Any other questions on this item, traffic calming? Okay, Wynn, thank you again. You did a yeoman's job today. A couple of significant presentations. We appreciate your efforts. Item 3, restart of in-person city commission meetings. Just wanted to let you know, I don't think we're going to be restarting them anytime soon. The numbers are not headed in the right direction. In fact, the governor just extended last night his executive order authorizing virtual meetings till August 1st. So we're continuing to monitor the data. I'm going to have the city attorney weigh in on a minute in terms of the ability of the public to participate, provide public comment. I've heard, and I'm sure you all have heard, people saying we should re-engage in person. But my priority as mayor is to protect the public and our staff, as well as those who may come to commission chambers. If we honor social distancing and the seats are marked in our chambers, only 23 people can sit in the chambers. You know, before we started the virtual meeting, if we honor social distancing, even on the dais, it gets kind of awkward. You have to have 2 rows of seats. And while we do have the Flagler Gallery is an overflow possibility, it's difficult to enforce social distancing guidelines for a large group of people. So I'm not looking to, I don't see opening up to in-person meetings anytime soon, certainly not before the county itself moves to a phase 2 reopening. I know they made that request and they backed off of that. There's still work to be done as a county, as a city, in terms of getting the numbers moving in the right direction. And my priority is the health and welfare of the public, as well as staff and certainly you all as commissioners. Ms. Rothenberg, can you speak to, again, the opportunity for the public to participate, to give comment in these virtual meetings?
Absolutely, Mayor. You know, as we discussed most recently this week, that the purpose of the open meeting laws is to provide public access to the meetings where public business is transacted. Keeping that constitutional mandate in mind and following the governor's executive order allowing for these meetings to take place virtually, the mayor entered his executive order that outlines how the public can access these meetings and how they can provide public comments. The processes provide various options to the public to view the meetings from the comfort of their own home, undertaking and keeping them safe, or they can actually come physically to City Hall, view the meeting as they could from their own home, and make public comment from the kiosk that's provided by the IT department. So we are, given the state of the emergency that we're currently operating under, it's my opinion that the city's process complies with the purpose and the intent of providing open access to the public meetings and complies with the statutory requirements to allow for public comment. I think that we've provided more ability under these emergency circumstances to allow the public to participate in a manner that they deem is comfortable, either coming in person or electronically.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple of questions. Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to you and Administrator Johnson for putting this on the agenda. This is one of the things that I have requested, and I want to be really clear. Safety is my #1 priority. You know, and I think to a lot of people, safety means waiting until we can, quote unquote, go back to normal. I wanted to have this conversation because I guess I would suggest that there will be no going back to the way things used to be. And so, you know, I wanted to have this discussion with everyone to say what were their feelings moving forward on making that adjustment, because the abstinence only policy will not last, and we're going to have to make new adjustments into this new world. So, you know, there are, by my count, 12 city commission meetings from now until the end of the year. And looking into our new world, we're going to have to learn how to live in a new way. And so I guess I would suggest that it's more and more difficult to have discussions with the public when you are able to sit in a restaurant and eat a meal, when you're able to be at a food drive, giving out food, and when you're able to be out getting a haircut, but you're not able to walk into the chambers of your own city government meeting. And so I think that there's a way for us to safely get there. I know we're looking at issues like mandatory face coverings, just like we saw at the county commission. But I think that's just an example of how we're looking to adjust to the new world versus not go out into it. And so I'm not by any means advocating for a full open up of any large gatherings, anything like that. But I think if we can have measured reopenings in our phasing, and so that way the public does have access, and I think we're complying with the letter of the law. But when it comes to communication and communicating with us, namely as elected officials, the medium of communication is very important too. There's a much different prospect of showing up on a Zoom meeting and speaking to your elected officials than there is being in front of them, testifying and looking them in the eye. So I guess I put that out there for food for thought and questions for other commissioners. Again, safety is the #1 priority. I guess I would like to look at ways that we can create a safe environment for this to happen. Again, I'm just advocating for city commission meetings only, 12 meetings between now and the end of the year. So thank you.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to clarify, Attorney Rothenberg mentioned this, and I believe I've heard this in the past, but I don't believe that I've seen it used at a city commission meeting. We do have the current ability for people to go to the chambers and to speak live and show up here. So the 20 people that you're saying who could safely socially distance could show up in the chambers if they wanted to, and have any, I see nodding of yes, nodding of head, so it's yes. Has anybody done that for the commission meetings?
I don't know if anyone has done it. I mean, we have the podium set up where there's a video camera there, and they can speak as if they were speaking to us directly on this Zoom meeting. And if that makes them feel more comfortable, sometimes people have technology challenges. They can show up at city commission meetings at the appointed hour, go to that podium and have their 3 minutes to speak to us directly. I don't know if it's been done yet, but we continue to make that accommodation.
And just a follow up to that, I'm curious, why nobody has shown up. If it is, as Commissioner Schoaf suggested, that people feel like that's impersonal, or if they're not aware of that. I don't know if we've heard anything about that, but it just causes pause to question that situation.
Well, I mean, I think we've tried to communicate it as best as possible, and we will continue to communicate that possibility as well as all others. I mean, I think they can communicate by email, by telephone, and so we will continue to get the word out as to how folks can participate, provide public comment in these meetings through technology or even by showing up on the chambers. At the chambers. Any follow-up?
I think Ms. Rothenberg has a comment related to that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reiterate what the host moderator is saying, that we did have a public, Ms. Matovich, successfully participate from the chambers at the audit committee meeting this week using the public comment podium. I also have heard from the officers who are there in City Hall during our commission meetings that she may have attended some of the commission meetings but did not speak.
Okay, Commissioner Neary.
Thanks. First of all, I'm very supportive of, at the appropriate time, definitely starting back in-person meetings. I noticed that the county, and I don't know if that is a particular item that we will take up, but at the county level, where they have installed plastic partitions. So again, I don't know if any of those measures are up for consideration, but I would be supportive of that. The other thing is I hear the compliance standpoint, that we are complying in terms of public comment. What I will say is the reality is I can probably count on one hand the amount of public comment that we have had since we have started the virtual meeting. So I appreciate the compliance. What I will say is that perhaps a double down of the communication, trying a different method to get that information out there if we are for the foreseeable future going to be using this vehicle. The reality is we've had, I think, some they're all important items, but items that I would have definitely wanted to hear from the public, understanding that we are in a different circumstance. But the reality is that I haven't heard from the public, at least in this forum. So it just tells me that there's a disconnect. And I'll just share this. I pay attention to other cities and their public comment because I was curious about this. Is this a phenomenon just to West Palm Beach and other cities? And surprisingly, I don't know how they're getting the message out, but there seems to be quite a bit of public comment happening. So I just share that with you. Even on our best day, we can do better. So I'm hoping that we'll take that approach when it comes to this.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. Just kind of as a tangent to this, but similar to engaging the public, if at a future commission work session, we could talk about engaging public, not only at commission meetings, but through neighborhood meetings or public outreach during this new normal, because it doesn't look like it's going back to our old normal anytime soon.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Commissioner Fox?
Hi, thank you. So I haven't actually had the luxury of even being in the City Commission chambers for a meeting yet. So, but I do support the idea that safety has to be our first concern. And I think, in many ways, the format that we're having now, we could actually have more, public comment than, when we were in chambers, if people knew how to get into the system, I guess, a little bit better. Like I know for next week, for example, we have, a big selection coming up, and I've heard from a lot of people asking how they would be able to make comments, public comments. So, I mean, maybe starting somehow for next week's meeting, we can have some kind of real push for getting the word out about how people can join the meeting or submit their comment in advance. But I do support the idea of, at least until we're in phase 2, staying remote and virtual, because I think it's hard to it's hard to just, I think, manage the health of what some people are taking it much more seriously than others. And so I thank you, Mayor, for keeping the residents safe. But I think, if we could have a better system of allowing residents to join these meetings, we might actually get more conversation than we would otherwise. So.
Well, and thank you for that. I don't know what better system. I guess we could do a better job and continue to work on communicating the existing ports of entry for the public. The system is probably as robust for public opinion and public comment as it possibly could be. So I will work with my communications department to see what we can do to get the word out there in a more proactive, aggressive manner, so that folks know that they can reach us by phone, by email, in person, and we'll just continue to beat that drum and let them know. But the portals of entry are in place, probably more extensively than it was if we were meeting in person. So we will work at doing a better job of communicating to the public their opportunities to participate in these virtual meetings. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would concur with most of the comments made by my colleagues. I would say that, just as you just said, communication, I think, is key, and we just need to figure out how we can engage the public so that they feel like that they are involved. Because I think that definitely I recognize that what Commissioner Nearing said is probably true, that we can count on one hand the number of times the public's been involved in our commission meetings. At the same time, though, I would agree with you that that right now is not the time to go back to quote normal. With the numbers increasing, I think it's time right now, at least, to stay the course and continue to monitor those numbers. When we see a downward trend, then I think we should talk about, is there some sort of an in-between type thing where we could, at least for commission meetings, maybe go back to in-person. But for right now, I think you're doing the right thing. Let's just keep up the communications to make sure that the public feels like they're involved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambert?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm curious. I'm definitely supportive of our communications department and the tremendous work that they've done. And I've seen an increase of the type of communication that we've put out over the last year. And it's been really great. But I'm curious if during COVID, we've made any modifications to staffing or budget. Maybe there's some areas that now that we're not having in-person services, that if there's staff that are able to support this need for increased communication and increased, electronic communication with our city.
Well, we have a social media strategy, people working on that. We do press releases, numerous press releases, and I do a newsletter every week. So I'll talk to them, but in terms of staffing of the communications department, they are fully staffed. There are enough bodies there, and so we will continue to. I'll talk to them, and we'll continue to look for ways to get this word out as to how we can how people can be involved. There's an adjustment that we all have to make, including us on the dais and the public, in terms of the new normal that we are in terms of conducting government in the sunshine. So we will continue to try that. Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to kind of get some clarification on this conversation, because I know we've had some discussions about not wanting to meet in chambers again until phase 2. I do find it to be a struggle that currently I can sit in a restaurant and have a meal, but I can't, as a citizen, walk into chambers and make a comment and see my city commissioners sitting in front of me. There are social distancing practices of wearing masks. We're 6 feet apart from each other on the dais. They're 6 feet apart within chambers. And so acknowledging everything that's been said here, what my goal is to not just make the public feel like they're involved, but to allow the public that access to be involved in as many mediums as possible. Completely understand and respect that we're going to work on some communications, and I think those avenues can still be open. When will we have that conversation? Is it on phase 2 that we should revisit this? When is it that we think that we will come back to this again, acknowledging that things change all the time? We were in a different position a month ago than we are today. I just want to keep this conversation going because I think it's a really extremely important topic to keep on top of mind as things change consistently.
We're having a conversation now. The analogy about somebody going into a restaurant is inappropriate. See, once we open up the meetings, we can't limit the number of people that come in. So unlike a restaurant, which could cut it off at 25% seating or 50% seating, once we open the doors to the chambers, we can't have a limited number of people access. So we have 23 seats exercising the social distancing protocols in our chambers now. If there is an item that 100 people show up and we're saying we're having an in-person meeting, somehow we have to accommodate 100 people. And whether that's putting them into Flagler Gallery, some kind of spillover, I don't know. So the safest way, at least in my thinking, is to have these meetings where we're all safe. And even on the social distancing on the dais, I mean, we had like 2 rows where we could, it was very awkward. So we'll continue to have the conversation, but I don't see a kind of a half pregnant kind of solution here. I think we have developed a very effective, very efficient way of meeting virtually. And I don't know if you could kind of stick one toe into the water and halfway do it. Because if we were to move back to in-person meetings, given the limited seating that we have in our chambers, exercising the appropriate protocols, and there is a popular, controversial, call it what you will, item on the agenda where a number of people want to show up, I'm not sure that we could honor and respect the appropriate CDC protocols. So I'd rather be safe than sorry when it comes to the health of our public, quite frankly. And we'll just have to do what we can. I say phase 2 because now that shows that there's been some objective measures as to the state of reopening of our county. And to me, that is a sufficient safeguard. Now, if the governor does not extend it beyond August 1st, we may not have a choice. But my thinking is, given that we are in a pandemic, I'm going to err on the side of caution when it comes to safety of the public, safety of the staff, and safety of us as commissioners and the mayor.
Mayor, if I may follow up.
Yes.
I think you bring up a good point in that if we have a controversial issue, that we're going to have a lot of people. And as we go along, the condition that we're in now, while the severity may be stronger and not so strong, the condition will remain. So I think that's maybe something that we need to look at, because we're going to need a plan for that, no matter if chambers open, however many months from now. I think that there is a plan in place. I fully acknowledge that we're in a pandemic, but what I suggest is that we're going to be in a new place, no matter what the time is that we get there. So what I am requesting is that we start to get those plans in place. It's been documented that it can be done, as county commission has not stopped meeting publicly. And we are not the county commission, we are the city commission, and staff has done a yeoman's job at getting us set up on this type of forum. I guess what I'm suggesting is that we continue towards that plan and continue having that conversation of when it is appropriate. Everyone's safety is the utmost, and so there has to be a balance in between when we're going to get to that new place where we're all safe and living in a physically distant world or socially distant world, however you want to frame it. So I guess that would be what I ask, is that we start to continue to have those plans in place so that at the appropriate time when we can open, we're ready to go.
Thank you. The comment is duly noted. And as to using the county commission as the role model in this, I don't subscribe to that theory. I'm doing what I can, the best job that we can for the citizens of West Palm Beach. And just because the county may be meeting in person, they never stop meeting in person, I don't take that as some kind of indicator that is the proper way to do it. So that's just my opinion. Anything else on this matter? Okay, very good. Thank you. Next item 4, police reform, social equity, Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you adding this to the agenda for today. And I have 3 points of discussion that I'd like to address. First, I have seen that the city is already taking action in some plans that we have in place. So my first question, an area that I'd like to explore, is how are we letting people know the actions that we're taking and how we are addressing issues of systematic racism in the city? And if there's something that myself as a commissioner can do to help get this information out to our networks to help amplify what the city is doing, that's one area of discussion. Second, I'd like to have a discussion on what we're doing to include our community, that we have the right stakeholders at the table to ensure that these things that we're seeing across the US don't happen in our city, and whether that is an opportunity to create a task force, a committee, or a commission on diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to city business. Would like to have a discussion on that. And then finally, want to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on and discussion top of mind regarding policies and procedures that either need to be reviewed or implemented to reduce racial bias issues or de-escalation techniques. And along those lines, maybe getting updates on our training requirements or our community policing efforts, because I know we have tremendous relationships with the community, with mental health organizations and professionals. to address some of the mental health issues and non-emergency issues, but just wondering if we've taken a look at how those are going, if they need to be strengthened, or what more we could be doing as a city. So those were kind of the thoughts that I had as far as this discussion. I don't know if, Mayor, you have staff that want to address those, or if we want to have this as a group conversation, but I just wanted to bring up those 3 areas.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your bringing those up. I'm in the process of putting together a mayor's task force on racism and systemic inequality comprised of citizens, and I've been reaching out to some, and we will be rolling out that task force very soon. The objective there is to have this task force of citizens begin looking at policies and come back to me and the commission with some recommendations for policies that we might be able to look at, adapt in our city. And so we will be rolling that out. And I forget what the other 2 were. If you want to repeat what the other.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Will we have an opportunity to give input on who we could suggest for that task force?
I'm happy to take suggestions if you want to send me an email with any suggested names.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first one was, again, following up on our communications efforts that we discussed in the last discussion agenda item, was there are efforts like this task force that you're creating. On the town hall, you mentioned that our police had looked at the 8 can't wait policies, and just wondering what we're doing, or if there's anything that the commissioners could do to help to get the word out about the things that the city is already doing and taking steps.
We can have the police chief come in and discuss the 8 can't wait, the policies that are already in place. It looks like I have him here. I don't know if he wants to weigh in now. The policies that are already in place. Happy to do that. I know Commissioner Schofield asked for that at a point earlier in the life of the demonstrations, and he was not as he was a little bit reluctant. Again, you don't want to start dancing in the end zone too soon, because all it takes is one incident in our city, and we'll have egg on our face. But can certainly at least update the commission and therefore the public on the policies that have been adopted. I know in various speeches that I've given, I have outlined the progress that we've made, but that's certainly worthy of a conversation.
Thank
Chief,
you, Mayor.
I see you're here. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that or not. He's muted. He may not be. And what was it? And the other one was, I guess, communicate. Well, I don't want to put words. What was the third one?
Sure. The third one was really just talking about reviewing our policies, talking about our training requirements, just having a relationship or reviewing our relationship with mental health associations.
We lost you. You're muted, or we can't hear you. I don't know what happened.
Oh,
okay, now it's better. Okay, going back. Start over.
I apologize. Thank you.
Okay.
Just, I guess, having conversations, it sounds like, and I've seen you and your staff are implementing and coming up with ideas. I'm not aware of all of them. The first time I had heard that our police were, compliant with the 8 can't wait was on the town hall. I'm just wondering if either we can be up to date on that or continue those kinds of communications with the community as well.
Yes, the short answer. I do see the chief has joined us. Chief Adderley, do you want to, I don't know if you've been listening to the conversation. I don't know if you wanted to weigh in or not.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We looked at 8 can't wait as, 8 is too late. I mean, we've been doing these, we had this in place over a year ago. I mean, when you look at all 8 recommendations, I mean, if there's something that you're recommending that we do in addition to putting it out on social media, I think that's already has been out on a number of outlets. Any suggestions on how we can market that better? I'm open to it.
I guess one of the things would be maybe a presentation like this at a commission work session about some of the community policing efforts that our stellar West Palm Beach Police Department is implementing, and hearing about those, just in light of this being a topic that I think our community is invested in learning more about, and seeing what West Palm Beach Police is doing.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just say, everybody talk about police reform, and I believe that since day one, since I've been here, I mean, reform has been, what are we currently doing and how do we do it better? We've done a pretty decent job, I believe, in reaching out to the community leaders and addressing their concerns. I mean, I don't know of any big pressing issue what's presently that deals with the West Palm Beach Police Department that put us in these categories that you see at these other police agencies that are currently happening and being criticized for. I mean, my agency is in the media now. They have a use of force committee, which, I created, I don't know, 10 years ago. But we didn't have body cameras 10 years ago. And one of the things that they did not do or included recently, once they implemented body cameras, they did not add it to their use of force committee. Well, we did that since day one, since we walked in the door. I mean, we have our legal advisor who has a group of people that we look at every use of force that's being a part of our daily operation. Anytime an officer uses force, it goes before our committee. And we have an attorney and a group of people that look at body camera footage, and we make sure that our officers are complying to our policies. When it's a violation of the policy, they make a recommendation to me, which I personally review, and we determine if this is going to be an internal affairs investigation or just one which our officer needs additional training. So that's just one piece of it. But I mean, we can have this discussion, and I think that one of the things that I think we need to consider here is we don't have big complaints here. I mean, no one from the public saying that we're doing a bad job. They're telling us we're doing a good job. I mean, I met last night with a group of residents from the North End. I mean, they have some very serious concerns about crime in their neighborhood. I think if you listen to the people that showed up last night at the police station and their concerns, they were pleased that we're addressing these issues in their community, and we're not creating a bunch of complaints to internal affairs and people complaining about police misconduct. I think that shows that we have a great group of people here that's committed to serving our city and protecting us on a daily basis, and they're doing it in a professional manner, and they're not generating complaints from the public, and we're taking enforcement action, and we're keeping our city safe. So, we can have these discussions, but, I hope if we're going to talk about some things, let's stay focused in the city of West Palm Beach. I mean, I'm not here to defend what's going on in Atlanta and these other cities that, they have a different perspective in how they do police work. I think I'm a reformed police chief. I've proven that. 8 years. Look at the things that my record did in the city of Fort Lauderdale and what we've done in the last year here. So I don't think we have a big concern when it says we have a problem with police reform in our city. I mean, that's just my thought.
Well, I think another thing, Chief, and I don't know if you want to get into it, even as you have handled the demonstrations and protests, and I understand that you all have actually sat down and met with the leaders of these various organizations prior to the demonstrations in order to map out a plan forward, which to me sounds very proactive, as opposed to just simply reacting to the events. Do you want to shed any light on that at all?
Yeah, I think that's a big piece. I mean, you know, we have a relationship with a number of individuals, and I just want to recognize Commissioner Nearing, who put us in contact with one of the organizers, who definitely we have a great relationship with them. And, you know, one of the things we need to be concerned of is, you know, we got a lot of people that are not really residents here in the city of West Palm Beach that are coming here and they want to protest. Why they pick our city, I have no idea. But you know, this is you know, a lot of resources come into the table here. We're putting a lot of resources on the table for protesters, for people that are non-residents here in our city. And as you probably going to know, I mean, I'm not really preaching to the choir here, but you know, we got some budget challenges here at this time, and a lot of resources are going to, you know, people that don't live here, and especially the ones that you know, want to cause a disruption in our city. You know, like an individual, like a few weeks ago, I mean, I personally spoke to a guy who was from Chicago, and he was upset because we were protecting the protesters. So who ended up, I stood by while he was taken into custody, and we did everything that we possibly could. I practically begged this guy to just please step aside so we could do our job. And this is a man that flew in from Chicago, and he's living at his aunt's house in Lake Worth. And this is what our resources are here to protect. You know what I mean? So I think when we start looking at all of these resources that we're putting on the table and the job that's being done, you know, we'll win these protests. You know, we got a lot of officers that are being told things that are not very professional, and they're criticizing us about people that do our job in other areas of the country, but don't do it as good as that we're doing it here in our city. And we need to recognize some of our good police officers that are doing a good job and being professional about it. We didn't generate any complaints. I mean, we're doing a good job, and we're providing a professional service here.
Mayor, if I could just follow up, and then I'm happy to turn it over. I see fellow commissioners want to make some comments. And
Sure.
thank you. Chief, thank you so much. I concur with your comments that I hear a lot of compliments, consistent compliments from our neighborhoods about our police department. So thank you for that. And thank you to all the men and women who serve every day in that capacity. You know, I think you just shared a lot of information that, you know, maybe others weren't aware of previously. And so I would just ask that we continue that kind of information sharing so that, you know, our community knows that we are proactive. We've been there. How did you call it? Didn't have to wait. You know, we were already doing that.
Yeah. 8 is too late for us.
Okay. Madam President, I think you had some comments.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you to Commissioner Lambert for putting this item on the agenda. I think it's an important discussion to have. I know a lot of us have been having many of these discussions, not only over the last couple months, but throughout time to start to address some of these systemic issues. And Mayor, thank you for your leadership in putting together that task force. I think it will be incredibly important to have those conversations and include departments and police and fire and everybody to make sure we're addressing it as a holistic issue.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought everyone froze there for a second.
No, we're.
I think as it goes on, some of the things that Chief Adderley mentioned today with the use of force committee, et cetera, were things that I wasn't even aware of. You know, I'm very fortunate to be involved with the police in the North End, looking at items like RECAP, the team that goes out and responds to any shooting or act of violence to offenders in the hospital to try to, you know, bridge relationships and get them out of a situation if they're in one. Cops and Scholars, Coffee with a Cop, Shop with a Cop, Farm Share. You know, these are all programs that many of us have participated in, are aware of, that are community programs that our police engage in, but many don't know. And I think at a time where nationally police budgets are under fire, it's particularly important in the city of West Palm Beach to understand what our police budget funds. You know, we're not purchasing large volumes of tactical gear. We're funding officers that go out into our community and build relationships. And I think it's important to have those conversations about how we proceed down the line, and what kind of things, you know, we always have room for improvement. Sounds like we are starting to have those conversations too, in engaging citizens. But, you know, we communicate to the extent that we can, to the extent that we can amplify this, because I know it is something that is under the microscope. There are a number of community programs, even with our firefighter paramedics. We have programs that are community paramedics. We have community policing programs too, you know? So I think sometimes we're all on the inside of what's happening, but, you know, from the past several months, one of the things that I had requested too was to try to get a better understanding for our residents, to your point, Chief, specifically for the city of West Palm Beach. What is happening in the city of West Palm Beach, to give everyone a level set from that place, to understand what their tax dollars are going to fund in policing. And it is for majorly staff that go out and really live in our communities, work in our communities, and really try to make a lot of things better. Again, can we have those improvements? Yes. That's why I think it's really important to understand where we are and where we need to go.
Okay. Very good. Commissioner Baduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'd like to say thank you to Chief Adderley and your men and women of the West Palm Beach Police Department for doing just, I think, a stellar job in the last couple of months. I can only imagine how difficult it is to be a police officer today. I'm a former reserve officer of 10 years, and I never had to deal with this type, you know, with this climate that seems to be unfortunately so anti-police. I certainly I understand that reforms are necessary in policing in general, and I think that we need to address the plague of systemic racism. But at the same time, we have to recognize that we seem to be the epicenter here, you know, in Palm Beach County, and yet our police department is just on the forefront and has been for some time on implementing reforms timely and doing things in the correct way. I'm sure there's always going to be some bad apples. There's always going to be an incident, you know, and unless and until you've been out there carrying a gun and have someone pull a knife or a gun on you, and you just want to get home to your kids and your families, you're not going to understand what it's like to be a police officer out there. It's a difficult job, and in this climate, it's even more difficult. So I want to thank the police officers, the men and women of the West Palm Beach Police Department, you, Chief Adderley, Chief Morris, and the rest of our officers, and say that I'm here to support you. I'm also here to recognizing, though, that there are reforms that are needed systemically and in police departments around the nation, but you guys are doing a good job. I'm sure there's room for improvement, but I do recognize that you guys are doing a good job in a difficult situation. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Nearing.
Thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I'm very supportive of a commission work session where this issue and item is independent. While I appreciate, with all due respect, appreciate the staff who presented on smart loading and traffic calming. I do believe that this issue deserves its fair time and an independent time, if you will. The second piece is, you know, from my vantage point, this is not an indictment on our men and women in uniform. That this is about a consciousness that, you know, quite frankly, has never existed in this country. And West Palm Beach is the capital city. I mean, it's a reason why I chose to live in West Palm Beach versus, and I won't name them, other small cities throughout Palm Beach County. And so I am not surprised that folks who want to express their views see West Palm Beach as the place and platform for that. You know, I understand, to your point, Chief, you know, the budget constraints and other things, but, you know, obviously we can't stop that, and it comes with the territory. I mean, we are West Palm Beach, and I'm very proud of that we can kind of be that platform, if you will. I'm not talking about the bad actors, definitely not talking about them. I'm talking about people who want to express their viewpoints and vantage points. You know, I think police reforms or the reimagining, if you will, is just one aspect of it. I think, you know, education, healthcare, housing, all of these all have deep-rooted inequalities that I think the city plays a role in. And quite frankly, I'm gonna say it again, I think the disconnect and the appeal that I have tried to make with the administration and you, Mayor, is I think what you hear, and I don't want to speak for any other commissioner, what you hear is a desire to, if we could, where we agree to make a united front as it relates to these issues versus, you know, each commissioner out doing their own thing, trying to wrap their arms around this. And so you mentioned this morning about a committee, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact term. Again, not that it needs to be, and you know, administration doesn't have to update me on that. But it'd be nice to be included in that process. It'd be nice to know, without asking, that commissioners could actually put forward names. And maybe that's not the way it was intended, which is fine too. I'll take that. But I think that's the appeal that I continue to make, understanding the strong mayor system, understanding that this administration has to take the approach that it feels it should. And I'm totally supportive of that. But again, I want to just harken back to this consciousness that we've never seen before in this country. And so there is no playbook for this. There is no, you know, we'll do it and handle it the way that we, and at least in my opinion, the way that we have handled other issues. This is truly, as it was with COVID, flying the plane and building it at the same time. And I just have felt like, especially when it comes to this issue, as a commissioner, as someone who is out and about, I'd love to be supportive. I've, you know, Chief, you know, I've reached out to you many times, including sending folks who have wanted to protest and they have the right to do that. I've asked them directly to call you, Chief. Can you call Chief? Here's his cell number. Can you call him and talk through it with him? So again, I don't know how else to make that. I think I need to just understand that that's probably, and again, this is me talking, this is my thought on it, that maybe that's just not the approach that we're going to take on this. We're not going to have that COVID-19 effect that, you know, folks are just having. I'll need to just kind of figure out where I lie in this and take the approach as a commissioner, as much leverage as I have to kind of support it. But I want to be super clear that I support our men and women in uniform. This is not an indictment. My son was a police explorer for 4 years and has desires to go into law enforcement. And I told him, absolutely, you be the change, you know, absolutely, you know, do what you need to do when it comes to that. So, you know, I think I'm rambling, but the point I'm really trying to make is, again, we are at a unique time, an inflection point, not just in this country. And so, to your point, Chief, I'm focusing on West Palm Beach, and we're at an inflection point in West Palm Beach, and we have, there's a spotlight and an attention that we've never had before. And I'd love to be able to take it from a unified approach, meaning, you know, having administration, having our commissioners who again, I don't speak for any commissioner other than myself, but I think would be on board with, you know, moving this issue forward. And of course, including our men and women in uniform, but there's so many other issues when it comes to city, again, to our city in terms of, again, you know, housing inequities, healthcare, education. So this is a broader issue in my mind, but I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to, again, having some time where we really can dig through this and hear just in these, you know, this is was supposed to end at 10:55 and move on to budget. So we've had about 25 minutes to talk about this. I'd love to be able to set up a commission work session where you, Chief, talk about some of the great things that are happening. And again, we as commissioners, or at least I as a commissioner, be able to then take that information out to the community beyond what's just happening kind of in, you know, so out when I'm out at Publix, when I'm out, you know, hopefully soon in my local faith organization, to talk about the work that we're doing, to talk about your leadership, and beyond that, beyond policing in this city. So those are my comments.
Okay, first of all, the budget portion of this has been canceled, so we have more time than, and I thought that word had gotten out to all of you. But as to, and I just wanted to clarify, the task force that I'm putting together will look at a number of areas, and it was not meant just to focus on the police. I'm, you know, going to look. I want the task force to dig into inequities in the area of health, housing, economics, finance, and industry, education, as well as civil and criminal justice. So they will have a pretty full plate, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing what they may come back to us with. So we will be rolling that out, and as we roll it out, we will certainly get word to you, commissioners, as to their scope of work. Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I was kind of thinking as we're all talking here, I think the structure that you set up for the CRU team was really welcomed. I know by this commissioner, it seemed like by my fellow commissioners, and I think that it showed great leadership in the kind of structure that was set up. And I know it was very robust. It was done very quickly, but I think we execute and continue to very effectively. I know I, as an individual commissioner, when it comes to this issue on a whole, have done what I can to carve out a small sector. I did economic recovery in the COVID unit. And so I've kind of carved out from my personal purview of focusing on creating economic opportunity. I'm working with groups of minority-owned businesses to try to make connections to get those opportunities, because I feel economic equity is part of this bigger equation. So I use that as a small example of a task that I've taken on to be part of what could be a larger team at your discretion, Mayor, to put as this task force. I think the citizen input is really important in this, but if there was a way to recreate somewhat of that structure where each one of us had a category or a lane, if you will, and that way we could all work together as a team. You know, I think we really have shown that the proof is there with the COVID recovery team. If there was some semblance of that structure that we could put together, you know, whether it comes down to economic opportunities, housing, even if it comes to, you know, taking a look at what can we do to have visual displays of Black Lives Matter artwork throughout our city, just different visual points that really help. If there was a way to create that similar structure with categories that pertain to this issue and maybe fit as a whole to your task force, it's something that would certainly be welcome for me. And, you know, I just want to go on record here that I want to be there at the table with you, my fellow commissioners, and working together as the city of West Palm Beach and showing that leadership. So to whatever extent that we can create that structure, you know, I would be supportive of moving forward in that direction.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And certainly as a legislative body, depending on what comes out of the task force report, there will be ample opportunity for you as a legislative body to work on adopting specific recommendations. So we will, there will be work for you to do, no question about it. But I certainly wanted to get the task force rolled out so that they can begin their scope of work and get back to us. So you'll be hearing more about that. If you have names that you think might be appropriate, certainly get them to me and I'll take those into consideration. Anything else on this particular item? I know there was a desire to kind of spend more time discussing it. So as I said, the budget portion of this work session has been delayed. So if there's some more that you all want to talk about on this, please, we've got some time on our hands.
Mayor, if I might, I think,
Yes.
just to bring it back to the reason why I had asked for this to be on the agenda was to get regular updates at your, how you feel that might be best delivered to us, whether that is press releases or at a commission work session, or I'm not sure, as they get rolled out possibly. I think that is definitely a common theme that I've heard from everyone who spoke on this, is that we recognize that you and the administration and the staff are doing some really great things. We just want to help be a part of that and help get the word out as well.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate that. Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's a great idea that commissioners be, able or permitted, if you would consider, the suggestions for that task force or that citizens committee. I would just ask that if it's going to be focusing on police use of force issues and the like, that you have some people on there that understand the realities of being out on the street. Also, it needs to be a mix, but I wouldn't want to see it just citizens, because in talking to even my friends, while I can sympathize with some of the things they talk about with law enforcement, you can tell that there's just a lot of misinformation out there about what's even being taught in the academies and what our law enforcement officers are expected to do on the streets. The use of force continuum or matrix, there's a lot of misinformation out there on that. I would just ask that there be a balance, that there be some representative of the law enforcement community, that are people out there having to deal with the realities of being on the street.
Duly noted. Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment, and say thank you to Chief Adderley for joining this discussion today. I agree there were many things that you talked about today that I wasn't aware of. So this has been, very helpful. And I just wanted to mention about the task force. I think, so much of what we're talking about now, in the spotlight are police issues. But, from what I hear in the community, they think the police are doing a great job. Chief Adderley is always walking around the city in different neighborhoods. People know him. I only hear, great compliments about our police. What I hear more about, in terms of systemic racism issues that are stemming more from, people that live in the historic Northwest, and their garbage is not picked up at the same rate as, say where I live in Rosemary Square, or that there are raccoon issues that are not being dealt with, or that, there are just not street signs on many different streets that they, I've heard that have been asked for a long time. I think that might not happen where I live in Rosemary Square, because things are, much more quickly implemented. So, I think that I would hope that your task force looks at all of those kinds of issues as well. These quality of life issues that really affect neighborhoods in different, different ways. So I am obviously new to the commission. I'm not entirely sure how long it takes to get a street sign, or, how I can, help make some of these processes a little bit quicker for my community. But, I would hope that your task force might just look at how different neighborhoods are treated, or how, the things, just their services, if it's, things are being done, on a different timeline. I would just, like to learn a little bit more about that, and to make sure that these equity issues are really being looked at and addressed, and that we can be treating fairly all of our neighborhoods for just their everyday concerns. So thank you.
And that's fair, but let me tell you, Commissioner Fox, if you hear things like that, you don't need to wait on a task force to address them. Bring those to our attention. If there are specific concerns, quality of life issues that need to be addressed, by all means, bring those to the city administrator's position so that we can address those immediately. While we would certainly look at, the task force will be charged with looking at broader systemic issues. If you have a specific concern from a specific neighborhood, please, you don't need to wait on the task force report to deal with that. But yes, your point's well taken. They will be charged with looking at broader issues and categories of disparity throughout our city, and coming back with some recommendations. Commissioner Neri.
Thank you. So I'm happy to hear the broad approach, which I think obviously is an appropriate one regarding the task force and just how we think about this work. You know, specifically to our police force, I think it was the late Governor Lawton Childs who said it's a poor frog that doesn't croak in its own pond. And I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can, we're on this communication theme, if we can both, I think can run parallel, both while we are always constantly trying to get better, because I think that's every department. There is, I hope that there's no department, police, development, administration, no department that believes that it has arrived, including the commission. All of us are on this journey to get better. So I think, you know, running parallel to that, we can also highlight, because I think this is the piece that I've at least heard from the community, is like what's happening on some of these issues, so that, you know, 8 can't wait, and really digging into that. You know, the Citizen Review Board, and Chief, I know you talked about it a little bit today. You said our committee, and I don't know what that exactly means, but, and I don't know that we need to do it on this particular forum, but at some point where we're really digging into that, because to your point, Chief, I do believe we have a great police department, and I believe that we also can build on the work that we're currently doing on this journey to get better. But part of that is how is it that we are communicating this out to the broader public, especially in this moment where everything is raw and people fill in the blanks. The absence of information, and people fill in the blanks. It's as simple as that. And so as best as we can, and any way that as a commissioner I can help support that. But I think that that is really important, especially for our police force, because you lead it, Chief Adderley, and I'm sure you know all the warts, or if you don't, you have folks that are, you have issues or systems in place to figure it out. But no better, I think, spokesperson than having you, as you always have, you know, kind of talk about some of these successes and how we can continue to build on that, and how the community plays a role in it. So again, everything that we've talked about before when it comes to our men and women in uniform and what's happening at our police department, how is it that we're getting that information out? Because again, maybe 6 months ago, it was more lip service, and there's no judgment there. I mean, it just was. It was a different time in this country. And I think now, and I'm happy about it, I think now that we have the spotlight, to your point, Chief, in 10 or 15 minutes, you've educated at least me on several things that I didn't realize that were happening. I can't imagine if we can get that out further in the community. And again, running parallel to that, maybe not in all the details, but talking about how it is that we'll continue to build on this. And again, even on our best day, understanding that we can be better. So thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Questions, comments? Seeing none. Anything for the good of the body from commissioners?
Mayor,
Yeah.
I have a question
Yes.
on another topic. Given the county's vote yesterday about masks, I realize they'll have to put out their policy related to that. How does that affect the city? And have we already been discussing actions that the city might have to take or want to discuss related to that?
Well, we are honor bound, or we're legally bound to comply with the county's executive order unless we want to make it stricter. So we're waiting to see what that executive order looks like. You know, the question I've had, and Madam City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong on that. The question I've had, and listen, I am in favor of making masks mandatory. The question is, how do you enforce it? So I'm very curious to see what enforcement mechanisms the county is placing in their executive order. I don't want to have my police department running around writing citations for failure to wear a mask. there are better things that they could do with their time. But we'll see what enforcement, I'm very curious to see what enforcement mechanisms the county is putting in place. But Madam City Attorney, as I understand it, we are bound by the terms of the county's order, correct?
Yeah, most of the orders that the county has imposed recently, they state in their executive orders that they are county-wide. So under the structure of the emergency management structure, we would follow the county.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Commissioner? Okay, Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. Just quickly on that topic. One of the things I heard at the county commission meeting yesterday was a suggestion that officers, if this was possible, to have, you know, a pack of masks in their cars so that, you know, if they were stopping someone with a citation, they might also be able to offer them a mask. I don't know if Chief Adderley is still on, if that's something that's a possibility. I know there's some cost to that, but, you know, just in case, you know, someone's out and they don't actually have a mask with them, just that might be a suggestion.
And again, if you saw that meeting yesterday, there's some folks who are adamant that they aren't going to wear a mask. So are we placing our police in, you know, in the line of fire with an unnecessary dispute over someone who's very passionate that, you know, no one can force them to wear a mask? I don't want my police officers to even have to deal with that. But again, we will see what the county contemplates. But no, there are folks who are very passionate about wearing a mask. It's not like they don't have one. They won't wear one. And do we want our police officers engaged in that level of discussion with the citizen? To me, it seems like there are better things that they could do with their time. But again, we'll see what the county is suggesting in terms of enforcement mechanisms. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all very much. And this meeting is adjourned.